Okay, this is gonna be short. After doing that last video 5 seconds ago, I was dissatisfied with my cone. Luckily, everybody here is asleep, so they don't care if I'm messing around with cones or not. And I'm looking at this picture and I'm noticing that the bottom of the cone is darker than the top. And that's kind of like a characteristic of the cones because this part is often kind of light. So I decided I wanted to try to do this, and I will show you how this is done. And now it's a lot better of a replication. I'm just turning down the bump a little bit. Two. Okay, so I wanted to show you what's called a gradient texture. So back to this shader menu, I have my principled BSDF, my principled shader. And in the principled shader, I plugged in the same thing I had before, this color ramp. Before, I just want to show you what the difference was. Before I had the color ramp and I had the noise texture. Now I have done a bunch of stuff. So I'm actually going to recreate this. I'm going to detach all of this stuff and I'm just going to move it aside. And I'm going to do it again. So at this point, I'm even going to detach. I just want to keep the color. So at this point, I just have like a beige kind of cone texture, cone color here. So I'm going to start by adding color ramp, and then I'm going to put a noise texture, and then I'm gonna put this aside. Now I'm gonna add something called a mixed color. This allows you to mix two different things in the same into the same socket. So the reason this is because I'm gonna have this noisy pattern, and I'm also gonna have a gradient. Gradient means it's fading from dark to light or light to dark in some direction. So first, let me just plug let me plug the noise texture and do these things one at a time. I'm going to plug this into the bottom. The mix shader, if you see, has two inputs, A and B, because you're mixing two different uh, patterns or whatever, mixing two different things, two different nodes. So I plug the color into the bottom. This is the noise texture. I'm going to plug the result into this. I'm going to plug this into here. And it's going to end up being kind of what we had from before, where it just looks like a bunch of dots. So once it loads, I'm going to show you what this factor button does. Okay, this factor button, if I go all the way to the left, it's just going to be the top. And there is nothing on the top, so there's nothing there. I go all the way to the right, and now it's the one on the bottom. So now this is just the noise texture. So before we had this random pattern of black and white, and we don't want black and white. So I'm clicking on this once again, pulling this up, and making this into some kind of orangish, that kind of beige cone texture, cone color, I mean. When I click on this one, it's going to be a lighter version of the same thing, like maybe something like that. And this one, I'll make it more kind of reddish and saturated. Maybe something like that. Okay. So again, if I play with the scale, I get these different dots of color. In this case, I'm actually going to make the dots a little bit larger. I mean, a little bit smaller. And for now, it looks very contrasty, but that's because I'm going to mix it with something else. So now the second thing I'm going to add is called gradient. So I press GR and this thing is called gradient texture. So far, if I plug this in, it's going to make a gradient from left to right. So let me show you what happens. If I plug this in, I'll put this slider all the way to the left now, so you just see what the gradient texture does. Once it loads, it's going to be dark here and fading off to the other side. So let's just wait till it loads. Come on, man. There we go. Okay. So if I'm going to exaggerate this, you see, this is dark here and light here. We don't want that because we want it going dark from the bottom and light to the top. So first of all, I'll keep this like kind of crazy as it is now so we can see what's going on here. This is clearly in the wrong direction. The gradient's going from left to right or and it should be going from up and down. So how do we fix this? Well, before we had the node wrangler installed. The node wrangler allows us to put nodes to change the direction of things. extremely necessary, useful and necessary. So because we have this magical node wrangler, I click on this gradient texture and I press Control T. And this, all of a sudden, these two nodes appear. And these nodes, this node is telling us where the texture is going to be placed on, and it doesn't matter. In this case, this is fine. But this here is all the orientation of the texture. And this one here says rotation. That's the one we need to change. Now, first of all, you have to figure out what axis is this even on. It's going from there. So I know what I'm going to show you. If I do this, if I move the x-axis, nothing happens. So that wasn't that. If I move the z-axis, again, nothing happens. Well, it kind of worked, but it didn't do what we wanted to. Clearly, that's not the right axis. But if we move the y one, it goes to the bottom, and that's what we want. We actually wanted that y-axis to rotate 90 degrees. So I'm going to input 90. And now it is at the bottom. And that's exactly what we wanted. Now I can use the, sorry, not the, I think I used the x to fade it up or down. So I kind of want, as this one is, let me go back to 0 for the Z. We notice that the texture is kind of at the bottom and it kind of fades out slowly, kind of like what I have here. Maybe I'll go a little bit more. Yeah, it kind of goes right below the cup thing. And now this is obviously much too strong, so I'm going to kind of chill this out a little bit. And it's still too strong, but now that's because I have the slider all the way to the left. If I do this, I can start to mix these two textures. That's just the splotchiness, that's just the gradient. But now this is a combination of both, which is what I want. So I have some of these bumps or some of these blotches and also some of this dark color. I kind of still don't want it to be that obvious because it's really subtle. But maybe something, maybe that's a little bit too much, something maybe like that. And that looks a lot more like the cone than it did before. I actually the dark should go all the way up there, so I'm just going to move this X a little bit more. See what happens. I'll go all the way, just to make sure I know what I'm doing, I'll go all the way there. If I do that way, it goes to the, okay. So I'll move that factor back. Yeah, that's not too bad. And the roughness, it's a little bit too matte, so I'm going to make it a little bit more shiny. And that's not too bad at all. Maybe I'll just make this a bit lighter. That's a lot more like the reference than it was before, except for it's too shiny. All right, that's all I wanted to do. I'm going to save that. And that's the video. It's pretty cool.